Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into the recent Israel-Iran ceasefire.
Right.
It's a situation that has, well, ignited a fascinating array of reactions and exposed some pretty deep ideological fault lines, particularly, it seems, within conservative circles.
Absolutely. The reactions have been all over the map.
We've got quite a stack of sources you sent over, mainstream stuff like AP, Fox News, but also Reddit forums, explicitly conservative media like Ben Shapiro, Elsa Kurt, and analysis from Responsible Statecraft, too.
A real mix, yeah.
So our mission here is to really dig into the important nuggets. Who gets the credit for the ceasefire? What are the varied conservative views on U.S. foreign policy here? And some surprising impacts on different political groups.
It gets really interesting when you look at how these big global events are debated, especially through that conservative lens revealed in the sources.
What's truly fascinating, I think, is not just how fast it all happened, but how differently it's been interpreted.
Exactly. The framing is key, especially across that conservative landscape. It really shows the complexity of geopolitical narratives today.
That's a critical piece. So let's anchor this in the MIRT event. President Trump's declaration. Sources like AP and Fox say on June 23, 2025, he announced the 12-day war was ending with a complete and total ceasefire.
And this wasn't out of the blue, right? It followed some intense military moves.
Definitely not. Just 2 days before June 21st, the U.S. hit 3 Iranian nuclear sites. The sources mention these huge 30,000-pound bunker busters, Tomahawk missiles. Serious stuff.
And Iran hit back quickly. They launched missiles at a U.S. base in Qatar. So this rapid back and forth set a really tense stage for the ceasefire announcement.
Yeah, a cycle of escalation and then suddenly de-escalation is worth a closer look.
For sure.
But despite that tension, the immediate fallout had some positive notes, like Democratic Rep. Jared Moskowitz.
Oh, right. What did he say?
He basically commented that if the U.S. degraded Iran's nuclear capability and Israel its military stuff in 12 days without losing American lives or going to war, well, that sounds like a win for the country.
Which is interesting framing, especially coming from a Democrat. It highlights that specific calculus strategic goals minus direct U.S. casualties.
And economically, things seem to calm down. Oil prices dropped about 5%, down to $65 a barrel.
That's significant.
And Trump was publicly pushing U.S. and allied producers to keep oil prices down.
That economic reaction is really insightful. The oil price drop wasn't just a number. It signals less perceived risk,
Yeah.
And for any administration, incoming or not, lower oil means lower gas prices. That's a big domestic political win. His push to keep prices down just underlines that clear economic and political priority, kind of aligns with that conservative focus on market stability, lower costs.
Okay, and that brings us right into one of the most compelling battlegrounds in these sources. Who actually deserves the credit for the ceasefire?
Ah, yes, the credit debate.
It's not just about bragging rights, is it? It shows how different sides frame good news to, well, boost themselves or undercut rivals.
Precisely. The interesting part isn't just who gets credit, but why the fight for it is so intense. It tells us a lot about the political climate and, the transfer of power dynamics.
Absolutely. So on one side, you've got sources, including a senior Biden official and Sheikh Mohammed of Qatar, suggesting President-elect Trump played a really critical role.
Even before taking office.
Right. His envoy, Steve Witkoff, went to Doha and joined the outgoing Biden team's negotiators.
Which is unusual in itself. Incoming admin working alongside the outgoing one like that.
Very. And Witkoff's credited specifically with pushing the Israelis to accept it. Reports mention a tense meeting he had with Netanyahu.
And the suggestion is he swayed Netanyahu more in that one chat than Biden had managed all year.
That's what some sources claim, yeah. Reuters reporting, referenced in some materials, apparently backs up Witkoff's critical role, even with Biden's team acknowledging it.
It really illustrates the potential power of a fresh mandate, doesn't it? Even before day one. That perception of a coming shift in U.S. policy could definitely change how regional players calculate things.
And some folks on those Reddit forums we looked at, they take it even further.
How so?
Arguing Trump's win basically forced Hamas's hand, or that Netanyahu deliberately waited to give Trump this gift right before the inauguration.
So for them, it's a direct cause and effect. Trump's influence, plain and simple.
But then there's the other side of the coin, a strong counter-narrative in the sources.
Skepticism.
Exactly. Suggesting that, okay, Trump's team was there, they were active, but the groundwork, that was mostly laid by the outgoing Biden administration.
So the idea is Trump sort of swooped in and capitalized on nearly done negotiations.
That's the argument. that his threats were maybe more political theater for the win rather than the actual diplomatic leverage that sealed the deal.
It does highlight that constant challenge, right?
Yeah.
Separating real policy impact from savvy PR.
Which brings us squarely to how conservative media outlets were framing it. This gives us a window into how narratives get built for specific audiences.
Good point.
Sources describe, say, The Ben Shapiro Show, as offering fantastic conservative analysis, accurate and truthful political news, often with a rational conservative approach.
So they'd likely focus on actions seen as strong, decisive, good for national security.
Makes sense. And then you have The Elsa Kurt Show, hosted by a self-described lifelong patriot and longtime police wife.
Okay.
Her show reflects, according to the sources, a fierce love and passion for defending the defenders and for this great country. And she specifically highlighted Israel's preemptive strikes on Iran's nuclear sites.
Based on that intelligence about imminent weapons capability.
Right. So that perspective emphasizes being assertive, proactive, defending allies that resonates with a certain part of the conservative base that values strength.
Yeah, decisive action.
So beyond the immediate ceasefire win, this whole situation really opens a window onto something broader. The complex and sometimes contradictory state of conservative foreign policy itself.
It's definitely not monolithic.
Far from it. Our sources show quite nuanced, sometimes conflicting views within the Republican Party.
That's critical. Responsible Statecraft, for instance, points out two pretty distinct camps. You've got the non-interventionists,
who argue the focus should be domestic, not going into another foreign war.
They often bring up Congressman Walter Jones, the late Republican who deeply regretted voting for the Iraq War, became a real critic of intervention.
Yeah, that's a powerful example, they cite. His complete turnaround, apologizing for his vote, listing the casualties outside his office. It shows a growing weariness in some conservative corners about the costs of intervention.
And they highlight the political risks of not speaking out against these wars, suggesting maybe that wing is gaining traction.
But then, conversely, you have prominent Republicans pushing for a much more assertive stance.
Right, the interventionist side, like Senator Kevin Cramer advocating strikes on Iran for preemptive prevention of war, deal with threats before they reach the U.S.
And Senator Lindsey Graham saying, quote, if diplomacy fails, you use force regarding Iran's nuclear program.
So that's the more traditional peace through strengths conservative view. Military action as a necessary deterrent, even preemption.
And the sources definitely grapple with the potential downsides of intervention in Iran, drawing parallels to the, quote, miserable record of regime change in the Middle East.
Iraq comes up a lot, naturally.
Repeatedly. As a cautionary tale, thousands of American casualties, spawning terrorist groups, a stark reminder of unintended consequences.
Which raises that huge question. What are the unintended outcomes?
Wow.
Especially somewhere like the Middle East.
Exactly. Sources worry intervention could actually strengthen regime hardliners in Iran, give them something to rally against.
Or, even worse, push them to speed up their nuclear program as a deterrent.
Right. Plus the damage to international norms about aggression and maybe hurting U.S. credibility as a negotiator globally. Echoes of the Iraq War fallout arguments there.
It's a complex web of potential repercussions.
So we've hit the diplomacy, the military side, the internal conservative debates. But there's another really compelling, kind of unexpected thread in one of the Reddit sources.
Oh, what can?
It poses the question, how do Arabs for Trump and other pro-Palestine Trump voters feel now?
Interesting question, given the context.
And the sources suggest significant regret among some, people feeling like they were pawns, expressing deep disappointment, especially given Trump's strong pro-Israel stance, those alleged comments about Gaza.
Wow. That shows how geopolitical events can just shatter prior political calculations, can it?
Absolutely. And that sense of maybe being used is amplified by comments suggesting Arab leaders themselves have moved on and see Palestinians as pawns. It paints a picture of a tough recalculation. Maybe domestic issues temporarily overshadowed foreign policy concerns for some voters.
That dynamic of single-issue voting, where maybe shared cultural values or specific domestic concerns outweigh the broader platform, that's a recurring theme, isn't it?
It really is, and it's fascinating seeing discussions about these unexpected alliances. One source noted Christian and Muslim fundamentalists finding common ground, like on that anti-LGBTQ plus book ban in Michigan.
Even if it meant aligning with figures who'd pushed policies like the Muslim travel ban previously.
Right. It's a powerful example of how shared social conservative values can sometimes bridge seemingly huge political divides, creates these counterintuitive coalitions.
Challenges those neat voter bloc categories and shows the complex motivations behind political choices. Single-issue voting can really reshape things.
And then, coming at it from a completely different, much sharper angle, some voices in the sources argue that Palestinianism itself is, quote, a destructive ideology for a fake ethnical identity.
Whoa, that's a very provocative viewpoint.
Extremely. Arguing Gazans need to rethink their ideology to get past what they call eternal conflict, victimhood, dependency, and misery.
So this perspective sees the October 7th attack as a significant geopolitical miscalculation.
Yes. And that past approaches just perpetuate suffering. So only unconventional approaches, they argue, can end the cycle of terror and killing.
It's a stark call for a radical reevaluation, suggesting the current strategies and narratives are fundamentally flawed and need a complete overhaul.
So after all that, what does this all mean for us? We've dug into the ceasefire details, the competing credit claims Trump's incoming team, regional player strategies.
Explore the diverse, sometimes clashing conservative foreign policy views, non-intervention versus preemptive action.
And we've seen these surprising political realignments, unexpected coalitions formed, and how big geopolitical moments can shift community allegiances, sometimes dramatically.
It really paints a picture of a complex dance between global diplomacy, domestic politics, personal beliefs, and that constant battle over who controls the story.
Definitely. It leaves us with a big question for you, the listener, to think about. In a world just saturated with information, but maybe short on clarity, where narratives are always being shaped, how do individual and national interests tangle with deeply held values and history to create these outcomes?
Yeah, what connection in all this material surprised you the most? And how might understanding these layers change how you look at future global conflicts and, crucially, the narratives that will inevitably spin around them?